Welcome to Right versus Left News, your daily briefing on the stories that matter, told from both sides of the aisle. I'm your AI host, Chris, and each day I bring you the most important political and cultural news, with perspectives from conservative and progressive voices. No spin, no agenda, just the facts and the opinions that shape our national conversation. Let's dive in. Here's a quick overview of today's 5 stories. First, the partial federal shutdown is over. Congress passed and President Trump signed a $1.2 trillion package that funds most agencies through September while leaving the Homeland Security fight for another day. Second, New York and New Jersey sued the administration over a freeze on $16 billion for the Hudson River rail tunnel. Third, President Trump said Republicans should take over and nationalize elections in several places, comments drawing constitutional and political fire. Fourth, Medicare's expanded telehealth coverage just got an extension through 2027. And fifth, the U.S. Navy shot down an Iranian drone that approached an American aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea. According to reporting from the Associated Press and the Washington Post, all of this unfolded in the last 24 hours. Before we jump into today's stories, a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Family GPT, the AI chat platform actually designed for kids. If your children are curious about ChatGPT, but you're worried about what they might see, Family GPT gives you full parental controls, content filtering, and the ability to align responses with your family's values. Whether Christian, Muslim, Jewish, secular, and many more. Monitor every conversation, set usage limits, and let your kids explore AI safely. No ads, no data selling, complete privacy. Sign up free at familygpt.chat.
Thanks to our sponsors for supporting Right versus Left News. Now, let's get to the headlines. Story 1. President Trump, on Tuesday, February 3rd, signed a roughly $1.2 trillion funding bill that ends the partial government shutdown. The package funds 11 appropriations bills through September 30th. Homeland Security stays on a short 2-week leash through February 13th, so lawmakers can keep negotiating over immigration enforcement oversight. The House vote was 217 to 214, and the Senate had already cleared the deal. The next flashpoint is DHS policy, not dollars. On the right, National Review frames the outcome as a necessary step to reopen government while preserving leverage to resist what conservatives view as Democratic overreach on ICE rules. Some conservative voices also highlight internal GOP dissent over the SAVE Act and election integrity demands that didn't make the final cut. On the left, outlets like the Washington Post emphasize that Democrats forced a standalone timeline on DHS to pursue body cams, warrant rules, and other accountability measures after high-profile incidents, portraying the short extension as leverage for reforms. Story 2. New York and New Jersey filed suit to restore more than $16 billion in federal funding for the Gateway program's Hudson River Tunnel project, saying the administration's months-long freeze is unlawful and could halt construction as soon as Friday. The states, along with the Gateway Development Commission, argue the freeze, imposed while federal officials probe alleged unconstitutional DEI practices, violates agreements and jeopardizes a vital corridor used by hundreds of thousands of riders. On the right, Fox News and the New York Post spotlight the administration's review of contracting and DEI compliance, with some conservatives arguing that federal taxpayers deserve rigorous oversight on multi-billion-dollar mega-projects before money flows. On the left, mainstream coverage stresses the economic and commuter stakes, amplifying Democratic claims that the freeze amounts to political retribution against blue state infrastructure, and warning of job losses and cascading rail delays if funding doesn't resume. Story 3. President Trump said Republicans should take over and nationalize voting in at least 15 places, remarks he made in a podcast interview with Dan Bongino. The idea collides with the Constitution's assignment of election administration to the states, though Trump aides point instead to federal legislation like the SAVE Act, which would require proof of citizenship for voter registration. On the right, conservative outlets tend to frame the comments within a broader push for tighter election rules, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and limits on ballot harvesting, casting them as responses to public concern about election integrity, even as some on the right question federalizing elections. On the left, mainstream and progressive outlets say the remarks reflect an anti-democratic impulse and rest on false claims of non-citizen voting, stressing constitutional limits and warning that any federal takeover would face immediate legal challenges. We'll be right back with more of today's news after this brief message.
This episode is brought to you by Family GPT, the AI chat platform actually designed for kids. If your children are curious about ChatGPT, but you're worried about what they might see, Family GPT gives you full parental controls, content filtering, and the ability to align responses with your family's values. Whether Christian, Muslim, Jewish, secular, and many more. Monitor every conversation, set usage limits, and let your kids explore AI safely. No ads, no data selling, complete privacy. Sign up free at familygpt.chat.
Thanks again to our sponsors. Now back to the news. Story 4. Medicare's pandemic-era telehealth flexibilities were extended again, this time through December 31st, 2027, when President Trump signed the health provisions embedded in the funding package. The measure also extends hospital-at-home and certain in-home rehab services, and directs new guidance to improve access for patients with limited English proficiency. On the right, center-right health and business commentary often praises telehealth as a market-friendly way to expand access and reduce costs, crediting bipartisan work and, in some accounts, Trump-era waivers that normalized virtual care. On the left, advocates cheer the access gains but push for permanence and guardrails, equity in broadband, language access, and data privacy, arguing that stop-start policymaking undermines continuity of care for seniors. Story 5. A U.S. Navy F-35C shot down an Iranian Shahed 139 drone that, according to U.S. Central Command, aggressively approached the carrier USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, about 500 miles from Iran's coast. No injuries or damage were reported. Hours later, U.S. officials said Iranian craft harassed a U.S.-flagged tanker in the Strait of Hormuz before a U.S. destroyer intervened. The incidents come amid heightened tensions and tentative talk of new negotiations. On the right, coverage often highlights deterrence, arguing a firm response protects U.S. forces and shipping and signals that harassment will be met decisively as Washington seeks leverage over Tehran's nuclear and regional behavior. On the left, mainstream outlets emphasize escalation risks and the need to keep diplomatic channels open, even as the U.S. maintains freedom of navigation and force protection, warning that miscalculation at sea could derail talks. Quick recap: the shutdown is over, but the DHS fight isn't. New York and New Jersey are in court over a frozen tunnel lifeline. Trump's call to nationalize elections is fueling a constitutional debate. Seniors' telehealth gets breathing room through 2027. And the US downed an Iranian drone near a carrier as tensions simmer. We'll keep tracking negotiations in Congress and abroad as the week unfolds. Expect updates on DHS by February 13th. That's it for today's episode of Right versus Left News. Remember, understanding both sides isn't about picking a team, it's about being informed. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join us tomorrow for another balanced look at the day's biggest stories. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.